Welcome to the Cybersecurity Matters podcasts. Your hosts today are me, Tom Wilding, and my colleague, Harry Baldwin, part of the cybersecurity team here at Nuco. And we are delighted to be joined by Wayne Lewandowski. Welcome, Wayne.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. Good to see you guys.
You too. Wayne is CRO at Hypori. He is a sales-first leader, and we're looking forward to jumping into how you maintain being an individual contributing salesperson while leading a sales function. He has successfully gone through the process of a number of exits in previous leadership positions, and we're really excited to jump into it. So to start with, tell us, how did you first get into the cybersecurity space?
Yeah, I got into it by already being in IT. I've been in the technology and software sales for most of my 35 years of sales and sales leadership. And transition happened probably right around 2012 or so, where I was selling a mixed portfolio with a consulting organization and started leaning more in onto the cyber technology. And at that point, got into a direct leadership role with a manufacturer, selling encryption solutions and data security. And then from there, I've kind of stayed really wed to the cybersecurity vertical.
What's kept you in the industry? What do you love about it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Tom. I would say what's different about selling cybersecurity versus, say, productivity or just core infrastructure, which obviously has many benefits to the organization and even to the seller to represent. But cyber is very literal. I think you can see generally we're selling defensive tools for the most part, and you have the opportunity to really see the benefit in, be it a commercial organization or government, how you are assisting and impacting the environment by providing the solution that you have. And I think that's pretty gratifying for most sales leaders or salespeople in general.
We've met before, we've spoken before, and you love growth, you love building, you love selling.
Yeah.
Why?
Gosh, what else is there to do? I think sales as a career is there's a direct relationship to not only the technology and quality of what you're selling, but even with that, if you don't have the hustle and the attitude to really put forward the effort, you're not going to see the reward. But that direct correlation can be seen by really a variety of different personality profiles of salespeople. I believe the antiquated approach of, let's say, folks that maybe are more like myself, very extroverted and highly social, still you see in a sales role, but it's really people that have the internal desire and passion to compete. And one of the questions I ask often in interviews is, how do you compete to beat your personal best? What does that look like for you? And we can always say, gosh, former sales athletes or salespeople are former athletes. And I think that's true because these are folks that understand you have to do the daily work to get to the outcome that you're looking for. But as we get older and married and have kids and real life, how do you still find the way to do that? And I look for people that have, Tom, when you and I were talking about playing golf, how do you get better at that? What are you doing to put the work in to get better at playing golf? Are you in the gym? Are you cycling? Are you running? Whatever that is that allows you to continue to demonstrate I'm still a competitor. And I think people that are really great at sales find ways to continue to get to that personal best in all aspects of their life. It's not just at the job. It's kind of how you're wired in the DNA that's in you.
I think what's particularly interesting about that and the competitive streak in good salespeople, is true from, and it differentiates from those very traditional versions of a hunter and a farmer, because really a salesperson fits into both of those functions. Good salespeople can fulfill a farming role, an account growth role, but competition links. The other thing that we've spoken about before is around curiosity, in asking and probing and wanting to know more and understand more. Is there something that in interviewing people and when you're speaking to prospective people, particularly from a competitive standpoint, that you're drawn to in their response? Do you, for example, get more drawn into the internal competitiveness to be better, or is there an attraction to a more team-driven success or being better than others?
Yeah, actually, the way I generally put that when I'm working with folks like Nuco as a recruiter is I'm looking for a profile of a salesperson that is highly competitive and very self-driven. I want to be the best. I want to be the number one rep in the company. However, they also realize being number one or at the top 10% in an organization is not something that they have to moat off their experiences from others. They still have a very collaborative spirit. They want to work in an environment where if Harry is doing well, it does not mean I can't still beat him, and that all boats can rise together. Someone still has to be number one, right? This is not meant to be equal across all, but it doesn't mean that we can't all be successful. So I look for folks that have that type of spirit of, I'm going to be your best rep, but I'm also going to be a great advocate for my peers. And they do that. You brought up a point that's really important for me is curiosity. How do they get into, well, gosh, Tom's been with the company for 5 years. How's he been successful? Where is he seeing these use cases uncovered? How are you working with internal resources? What are some of the obstacles that you're facing? Just constantly seeking out information. And I think it comes from a posture too of listening more than talking. And great salespeople are fantastic listeners. They know how to suss out that information and get to the essence of what's going to drive this opportunity and what's going to make it successful for that customer. Because let's face it, there doesn't have to be a winner and a loser in this value prop. We have to win on both sides of that scenario. And if you can do that appropriately, you can get best value for you as a representative of the company, but also for your customer, and gives you that opportunity to be long-standing in your career in a specific territory or vertical because people have trust in you because you are listening to what the needs are that you're trying to align.
Yeah, and really actively listening.
Absolutely.
I think sometimes you can listen and you can hear, but there is a skill in listening, which sounds totally ridiculous, right? Because you're born with an ability to. But so you make a really good point. We've spoken in depth about how you love the process of selling and being able to sell. You've spoken about it being a really important part of your leadership style. Mm-hmm. How do you balance being able to contribute and impact sales while also holding the level of responsibility that you do?
Work a lot of hours, Tom.
That's fair.
No, that's a great question. And I think this is a transition that I've mentored folks on that want to get into sales leadership. Is it's not always true that the best performers as an individual contributor make the best leaders, especially in that first position when you get into frontline management. Because your natural tendency is, I'm used to being the quarterback, to use a U.S. term. I'm calling the plays. I'm the one that's initiating how we use the internal resources to capture the engagement that we're pursuing. And you have a natural tendency when you first get into management that if the deal's going sideways, to move the rep out of the way, let me just take care of this. And I think that's one of the transitions you have to realize is sometimes you need to give direction and let the pieces fall where they may. And not maybe necessarily put the deal at risk, but give some room for people to get their knees scuffed up a little bit and create a learning environment where you can guide things directionally without being in every literal step. I mean, a lot of times we refer that to as micromanagement. And generally, I think you find A and A+ type personalities not really aligned well with a micromanager as a leader. And so you have to give structure and ensure that you're creating counsel, but let people add their own style to that. So I think that's important from a frontline perspective, but being in a more strategic role, it is challenging. And I think especially in a startup where you don't have the levels of management and leadership in all cases in the organization. So you find yourself traversing through different levels of responsibility. And you just really have to be good at ensuring that you're moving the company directionally forward from a strategic perspective, but where necessary, adding in that additional input to ensure that transactional tactical activities are being completed. But it is a challenge. It's not for everybody. And I think that's what's different about working in a startup versus a mature state company where you're managing growth versus having hyper growth. And generally, I define that as somewhere between 50 to 70% year over year growth, which is where Hypori is at. And it's exciting, stressful, and very dynamic. And those are things that aren't always aligned with how a lot of people like to work. So it's different.
I have one more question on your leadership style before we jump into Hypori, because you know, clearly you're excited. We've been following you and are excited too. So we do want to talk about it. But Harry and I both lead functions here at Nuco, and towing the line between giving people the opportunity to make mistakes and to fail through doing some of those things themselves, but while also not jeopardizing a deal or some sales. That's a really tough balance to delegate and go between. Personal question as much as anything, but I'm sure the listeners would enjoy it too. Any tips on how you toe that line?
Boy, first and foremost is hiring well. And I think that goes back to some of the comments that we just had, is finding that person that wants to win, but has enough humility to know that I may not have all the answers. I might have the best earnings history of anyone in the company, but that doesn't mean I understand our value prop. I understand the nuances. I know how to overcome obstacles better than somebody else in the organization. And having the ability to work across the org to do that is, I'd say, critically important. And so I think hiring well is the first point of that. And then I think it's having a leadership style that does manage by objectives and ensures that you are reinforcing some of those capabilities to extend out to a broader team to collaborate on different things and ensure that we're putting our best foot forward. I mean, as much as I've enjoyed being an individual contributor, the longer that I am in a sales leadership role, the more I realize the team that surrounds me from a variety of different departments and parts of the organization are all really critical to us ensuring that we're doing the best thing for our customer.
Yeah, fantastic answers. I've loved all your responses so far, Wayne. So thanks for sharing those. A quick question on technology before we talk about Hypori. Lots has been made of the impact of AI and other technologies on the sales process itself. How do you foresee AI and other technology impacting the sales process moving forward, and how do you guys use it today?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's a great question. And I think this has a lot to do with what we've seen change, even in the last 10 years. But definitely, if I go back into my career, which is over 30 years, salespeople generally got to know accounts intimately well. And you hired Harry or Tom or Wayne because they know these accounts. I'm the guy. I've got the Rolodex, if you will, that allows me to walk in there and present product. And because pre-internet, that's how you found out about a lot of things, right? It might be a referral, but it was generally that person having the hustle to go out to accounts and expose them to something new. That's not the case anymore. The buyer's journey doesn't generally really start with the sales rep anymore. It's self-initiated. It's getting digital and social exposure to different things. The prospect now expects to be able to consume an enormous amount of information about the solution that you're representing in the respective category well before they hit a gated asset that says, okay, I'm ready to give up my name, number, and email to be contacted by sales. As we look at that process, that's where certainly one area where AI can be really impactful. We have to have enormous amount of at-bats. We have to create a better qualification process. We use some technologies here within Hypori to help with chatbots and things of that nature. We're using AI to help us with our forecasting elements to look at gaps, especially as you get into more of a high volume sale, being able to look at the different aspects of, are we reaching out? What's the frequency? What is the tone in the email or the recordings from video meetings that determine that there might be potential risk in a deal? All of those areas are really important. But at the end of the day, do I believe that AI by itself is going to replace salespeople? Not that you asked that, but the answer is simply no. And I think it's always really comes down to the human condition in general, especially in disruptive technologies. We know that we need the assurance of, I trust Wayne. I believe he is somebody that I can work with. He has listened. He has given me the resources necessary from Hypori or whoever you're representing at that time to give me the faith that I can jump into something that is maybe a category creator and give them the assurance that you are going to be there through what in many cases might be a little bumpy. I mean, let's face it, the real mark of any company as far as the quality of how they support their customers is not when it's perfect. It's when something goes wrong. And you can listen to an enormous amount of podcasts of, especially in hospitality. I always think about the founder and CEO of Ritz-Carlton and how he talked about the empowerment that he gives even down to folks in housekeeping. And I believe, and I may be a little off, but I believe the amount is up to $1,500 of authority to satisfy a customer's issue dynamically. And you think about that. If you trust your team to do things like that, you can have a really satisfying customer base because candidly in the SaaS world, as I've had this discussion with my customer success team, is as soon as we go to contract and get an award, we are 12 months away from risking churn. That keeps you on your toes. You have to be in a much tighter execution to ensure that you are creating success criteria and outcomes that that customer expects really from the onset of the relationship.
Yeah. No, really interesting. And do you think so quite often when we qualify sales roles, we talk about the strong track record of new business, the experience working with certain accounts, the mentality, the attitude, all those things. I hear lots of candidates and speak to lots of people that are interested in moving into cybersecurity. How important do you think that kind of technology understanding and previous experience working within a disruptive space are to being successful in the cybersecurity industry more specifically?
Yeah, I would of course probably lean in on somebody that had that experience as a tiebreaker, but is that always the case of how I'm hiring people? I would say the answer is no. Core infrastructure and IT certainly important because at the end of the day, who are we selling to? Generally, there is a lot of commonality, especially when you look at mid-market and smaller. You're going to be selling to the CIO. There's not a lot of structure in those organizations either, where you've got, in the case of Hypori, somebody that's truly responsible almost exclusively for mobility and security-related solutions around mobility. So in that case, knowing someone that's worked in that area is really important. But to your point, Harry, one of the areas that is really key is if somebody's track record is I've worked for known entities where they were in that managed growth phase while they were there, you're really just in a truly farming exclusive role. I'm expanding a known quantity. Now that's important and those are skills, but is that the same as saying something that I call the name game is when you're working with a disruptive technology and I come in and I'm talking to two of you as a potential prospect and someone says, oh, I got it. You're just like, oh, we already have that. And when you're really a category creator, the answer is that's not true. But you have to have the critical thinking skills to say, I totally understand why you would say that, Harry, but here are some things that differentiate us and what brought us to market. And you brought up a great point, and that's why so-and-so is a customer of ours. And being able to tell those stories as you align those use cases in a way that's really meaningful, and the prospect starts getting comfortable with that type of capability. So those type of soft skills, really important, more so than saying, gosh, Wayne, I've been in cybersecurity for the last 15 years, and I'm really good at selling things that have already been known for 10, 15 years. That I would rather take somebody that has that curiosity, has that approach to be able to position and differentiate at a very dynamic level with a prospect.
Brilliant. Fantastic. That's great to hear. We have to move on to some of the technology stuff because I'm dying to hear a bit more about Hypori more generally as a business. You've brilliantly explained to us in the past the kind of core technology and concept behind Hypori. Could you explain to our listeners a bit about it and what makes you guys special?
Sure. Hypori really fits an interesting space. I mean, when we look at technology today, especially over the last couple of decades, we've gone from really this very centralized approach towards IT, right? Mainframe, and then maybe Unix systems and client servers started creating diversity and volume of different attack points. As the internet came into play, it became part of the fabric of business and the consumer world, the peripherals became more important. And what happened as we approached the state that we're in now is the Internet of Things has created a much larger landscape of attack surfaces. And the one that's really the largest is the mobile platform, be it a phone or a tablet. There are more phones and tablets than there are servers out in the world, and that will continue to be the case. I think we could all agree between the three of us, we probably all have more mobile operating system devices than we have servers in our home, right? And so when you think about that, it's not much different in an organization. And so if this is how users are behaving, how they're consuming and creating content, then this becomes a really important component to how do I preserve the integrity of data, applications, infrastructure as an entity, be it commercial or government. It really doesn't matter. And so what Hypori has done is taken something that is known in the market, which is virtualization, and extended that capability down to the mobile operating system. So instead of having a phone for personal use and a phone for work, I now have the ability to have a virtualized instance of a mobile operating environment. So in the case of my phone, I have two different virtual workspaces that are corporate that I can access from my personal phone. And what makes that unique from something that is a known area of our category is securing endpoints with things like mobile data management, MAM technologies, is I don't have the same limitations. So I'm not restricted to a specific set of applications. Whatever I want to put into that template, if you will, can be provided to that user and presented as a picture, if you will, because all we're sending down to that endpoint are encrypted pixels. So I separate all the corporate assets into a cloud instance that is streamed as pixels to my personal phone, which means I never have data. I never have applications that are resident on that device. So if I lose it, if it's compromised, there's no issue. I have no data there. It no longer becomes an attack point. From the end user's perspective, what's really important is, and this is where a lot of folks we see pushback from large organizations with their employee population, is I don't want mobile data management on my phone. Why? Because you have the ability and have observance of what I'm doing on my device. And if something happens and there is a spill, that you could revoke the device, completely erase or zeroize the entire device as well, which might have personal things that I want to keep. That's generally kind of a non-starter, if you will. And we do find that with our customer base in your region of the world, in the UK and Europe, personal privacy mandates are absolutely critical. So we preserve that ability to ensure we have no observance of the personal device and activities you're doing, while never compromising what is actually happening for the organization on that personal device. So it's really pretty unique in that way.
Yeah, super interesting. And is that message is really applicable to the concept behind it is really quite simple to grasp, which is unusual because I speak to businesses in security all the time, and sometimes it takes me a little bit of a while to wrap my head around it. Does that mean that your kind of product and offering is? I imagine it's applicable to so many different kinds of businesses and users. Does the messaging to those different groups differ slightly? And is there an emphasis on your end on a certain type of customer?
I would say that it's a bit of a volume game because, again, we're selling a license structure that is based on the amount of device instances. So me as a user. So we tend to look for organizations that have an employee base that is out and about, if you will, in motion. And that addressable market really goes across both government and commercial, but typically large organizations are the one that we're focused on. And it starts with things as simple as Wayne is an executive with our company. He travels a lot, both nationally and internationally. He finds himself on public Wi-Fi, and we have concerns about that. We don't want Wayne traveling to potentially adversarial markets such as China while having a US phone. And so we can take the ability, because we've abstracted the virtual workspace of the phone away from the device itself, which means even though I'm accessing my corporate resources from my personal phone, when I travel abroad, I could be picked up at the airport, grab a phone out of a basket, hit a QR code, and I instantly have access to my workspace. At the end of my trip, I drop the phone back into the basket for another employee to use. And so that travel use case is really important and meaningful. The other one that's much broader for organizations is bring your own device. As we talked about, most organizations are finding this a bit challenging because of the privacy impact, the spillage risk, because even though I might have software under that is defensive in nature, that really means something has to happen. And did I catch it in time? I mean, that's part of the challenge with cybersecurity is the response period to inoculate, quarantine, things like that. If I don't have to worry about that, it doesn't matter how foolish or negligent Wayne as a user is and what he does on that personal side of the device, because we already assume the device is corrupted and compromised. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's not going to impact my corporate assets. And that's really a powerful thing.
The other bit that I'm always drawn to whenever you talk about your offering is just the simple practical elements of needing to own two phones to work.
Yes.
Like my old workplace, I had a work phone, and that would be on any business trip, two chargers, two phones lying about in the pocket. There were two different operating systems. So with one, you have to log in by creating a swirl and the other's numbers or face. So, there is an appeal that is, like Harry said, I think, really easy to get your head around. Right. Because for so often in security, it is, everyone says they can do everything.
Yes, correct. And you're right. And that is the old school way of doing it, is let me moat the environment. And the first way I do that is do it with a physical boundary. If I can be released from that argument by creating an encrypted boundary that ensures that I have complete isolation. In other words, simple things like I get an email from Harry and I want to cut and paste his contact information onto the personal side of my phone. I don't allow that to happen. I can't screenshot an email or a sensitive document into my personal photo gallery. If I take all those things away, then the risk is not there. And you bring up something that, I kind of make as a joke, Tom. I spoke at an event just last night, and I went around the room with a bunch of CIOs and CISOs. Okay, we're gonna see who has the most phones by users in their environment. I won't tell you the university, but because they work with federal grants, they have a lot of our broad programs for the faculty, and plus their own personal information and corporate information as a university. They have users that have as many as 4 phones. Now think about that. You've got a backpack of phones. I mean, that's just insane, right? Who wants a Batman utility belt of phones when you're going through the airport? It's kind of ridiculous.
It's totally ridiculous. It's easy to get your head around. I want to hear from you why good salespeople should join you and the mission at Hypori. What would you tell them to get them excited?
Absolutely. Well, I think first and foremost is we are doing something different. And it's, like I said, it's known from a virtualization standpoint, but the larger companies that have made it in virtualizing server technology and virtualized desktops have not gone into mobile. So it's a very broad and open space. And it's addressing needs that are for compliance, for BYOD programs. We talked about executive travel, working in classified environments for sensitive users in government. It's an enormous opportunity. And we've shown that in our results as an organization. We're in the 4th year of our existence, and we have not grown less than 50% year over year. So that's an exciting thing. For individuals that really want to seek out something that is a challenger type of environment to create a category and build momentum on something that's really exciting, this is it. I mean, I think there are inflection points that we see in technology that really are meaningful. And as I mentioned, just enormous growth in mobile devices is pretty profound. Being part of something that really captures and reduces the risk for a customer base, irrespective of where that might be or what it is from a vertical standpoint, that's exactly what Hypori is doing. And we're engaged. I mean, from a culture perspective, Hypori is probably one of the most nimble and agile organizations I've ever been part of. And we've got a team here that does work really well together. Small companies aren't for everybody, but when you're part of an organization like this where everyone is really focused on the end goal and how to get there, it can be pretty darn exciting for the right personalities.
Wonderful. Well, that'll be a sound nugget and a half to anyone considering joining. We have a final question. It's the same final question we ask everyone that's ever been on our podcast, or coming up to 100 of them. What single piece of advice would you give to someone entering the industry?
I would say it goes back to one of the things we talked about earlier, is that curiosity. I mean, yes, there are degrees now in cybersecurity. Does that necessarily prepare you properly for a career in sales in cybersecurity? I don't necessarily think so. I think a lot of the education here is self-initiated, and having that personality of just wanting to continually consume and understand things and drive towards that with an attitude of personal best, I think is enormously important. I've seen people come from a lot of different careers, decide to get into sales and specifically into cybersecurity. And the ones that make it are the ones that continue to have that learner type of attitude, but really have a competitive streak. And I think if you can match those two things up, you can find yourself further in your career than you would in probably most traditional roles.
Wonderful. We have reached the end. Wayne, thank you so much. It's been great to hear all of your thoughts, insights, and everything in between, and a real pleasure to have you on the show.
I enjoyed it as well, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you.